So as I'm sure you all can see, I would literally respond and read every single comment that I receive on my YouTube channel. And so ever since I uploaded all of the videos in my Panama series, since I uploaded the first video rather, I knew that I wanted to do a response video to my first video that I did where I talked about how language learning or going to another country just to speak Spanish isn't fun, and my experience being blah speaking Spanish in Panama. And again, because I read every comment, I started to notice that either one or two things were happening. Maybe my point was not clearly articulated, or my point was interpreted incorrectly. And so I just like to clarify my point in this video, talking about just my response to that video about travel and speaking Spanish. And I just wanted to make a couple of points that I think some of you can relate with. Um, and so, yeah, that's the purpose of this video. It's kind of a response to that video about me discussing why I think that travel for the sake of travel, or for the sake of traveling for the sake of using Spanish, as someone that's at my level, is is not very fruitful or a very engaging experience. So from the comments of that video, I could tell that people possibly perceived maybe my disposition in that video, my explanations in that video, as some sort of way of saying that I did not enjoy my trip to Panama, or that I didn't like going to Panama. I liked Panama. I would go back to Panama. I have nothing against Panama. I really enjoyed it. Met some super cool people. And I don't want you guys to think I dislike traveling either. I love traveling. I'm not going to say I love it. I'm not going to say that. I like it, though. I like traveling for sure. But there are just certain circumstances and certain things that need to be in place for me to feel that traveling is worth the time and the money. Again, I have the money to travel. It's not a big deal, but it's a matter of whether or not it's a priority for me, linguistically and just in general in my life. And so I want to talk about the linguistic piece first. I want to make an analogy that I think might resonate with you all. And the city that I'll use is actually an extremely interesting city to me. I'm just using it as a reference point. Guys, if I told you right now that it's not this expensive, but let's just say, again, follow my analogy. If you find holes in it, poke holes in it. I'm okay with a little intellectual discourse here. If I told you that I'm going to buy a $600 plane ticket to go to Salt Lake City, Utah, where I know no one, there's not anything, again, there is, but I'm just using this as an example. There isn't anything per se that is drawing me to Salt Lake City, Utah, outside of going to Salt Lake City, Utah to practice speaking English. And you'd be like, what? Again, going from Atlanta to Salt Lake City is not that expensive, but you'd be like, you're going to spend $600, stay in some hotels just to go and talk to people in English? Like, what's the point in that? I know some of you are like, what? Where is he getting? What is he getting at? I'm not saying Spanish is at the same level for me as my English, but it's not that far off. Again, I make mistakes, but I'm just saying in terms of the feeling when using it, it's not that far off. It's about as different as it would be for me maybe to play a sport ambidextrally. It may be a sport that I'm used to playing with both hands. You know what I mean? My left is going to be less intuitive, less strong. It's not going to be as strong, but it's still capable. Okay. And so the point I was making in that video initially on my last day in Panama was that I just don't see the benefit once you get to an advanced level of just gallivanting around Latin America for the sole purpose of using the language, especially for someone that's like me, who did not grow up like I did not grow up with. I was very worldly in my thoughts. Like I remember, I've always been very worldly in my thoughts, but I did not grow up with a vision board with a plane on it, with Paris on it, and that's not me. Like that's not me. You know what I mean? And so that's the point I was making, is just linguistically going to another country solely for that purpose is not beneficial. if I have a reason to go, if there's an event or some historic landmark or something that I really want to experience there, then yes, I'll go. But just gallivanting around Latin America was not appealing to me for the same reason that gallivanting along or across Salt Lake City, Utah, would not be appealing to me right now without a reason to do so. The other point that I failed to mention in that video was I was primarily referring to solo travel. I think people are what make life rich. And so I think you can put me in any part of the world with my good friends, with people that I enjoy spending time with, and we're going to enjoy it. So at that point, the place is not what's important. It's the social interaction, it's the relationships. However, there are places that I just really want to go to. And so going to those places solo makes sense. Going back to the point I was making, traveling solo just to go somewhere that I really maybe have no intrinsic reason to visit just for the sake of speaking Spanish doesn't do it for me. Another thing that I want to actively do on my YouTube channel is I want to disconnect language learning, and particularly learning the Spanish language, from the wanderlust travel vlog community. I'm not saying I'm just going to be this, I'm not some maverick or anything, but I just want the people that watch my videos to completely understand that those two things don't have to coincide. Like, you don't have to have a desire to learn the Spanish language to then go travel and gallivant across Latin America. Because let me give you some circumstances of people that might want to learn Spanish, and I definitely don't want to discourage them by encouraging them to only want to use the language for travel purposes, or feel like they're failures if they don't get a chance to hacer un recorrido por Latin America. Like, I want as many people to learn the language as possible, and there are multiple situations in which it's beneficial to do so. Guys, I have audience members. What I have people that watch my channel from Australia. They're not just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Latin America like we are. I could be in Cuba in 2 hours. I can be in the Dominican Republic in 3 hours. I think I got to Panama in like 3.5 hours, if not less. 3 hours and like 20 minutes. And so I want Australians to find benefit in learning the Spanish language, because I can list off 15 benefits of learning the Spanish language, even if you live in Australia and you're not a few hours flight away from Latin America. There are benefits to that. I get comments from people from Kenya, from East Africa. I would hate to discourage them from learning Spanish simply because they can't travel as readily as we all can that are in the Western Hemisphere and the States. Like, that just doesn't make sense. I don't want to discourage anybody from doing that. I don't want to discourage the 78-year-old retiree who had a intellectually fulfilling and stimulating career their entire life, and they're seeing maybe not early signs, but signs of cognitive decline, and they want to take up learning Spanish as a mental stimulation activity. Are you telling me does it make sense to tell that person that they're wasting their time learning the Spanish language if they don't get out and explore all these Latin American countries? Again, I still am going to do that. Nothing against it. With the right circumstance, if something calls me to do so, I'll still do that. But it's not an obligation it's not something that's required to learn a language. These reasons are still valid to learn a language, to learn Spanish, even if you can't travel the world. I don't have to sell learning Spanish to you guys, especially learning it in your home or your local community, but I'll just give you some examples. I did student teaching here in Metro Atlanta in a city by the name of Marietta, Georgia, and I did student teaching in a part of Marietta that is majority Hispanic. So like when I did student teaching, most of my students had immigrated to the U.S. or were like first generation. There was a high Spanish-speaking population in the school. Like more than 70 to 80% of the students were either Spanish-speaking or their parents were Spanish-speaking or something of the sort. I remember, this was when I was in college, I remember having so many parent-teacher conferences, and they would always get held up because the parents needed us to speak Spanish, and the only Spanish speaker in that school was the custodian that only worked in the afternoon shift at the school. And so we'd all have to wait until the afternoon and just plan different things around the fact that no one in our local community outside of this custodian spoke Spanish. I mean, if I were put in that situation right now, I think I would be extremely thankful for the time investment that I made in learning Spanish, even if I never got the opportunity to travel. Okay. I'm still going to travel. Again, I'm just using myself as an example. But again, I just want to disassociate these things. I think people think that I can't use this term properly. I think people think that they're mutually exclusive when they're not. Another thing I never want to do also, and again, I want to help disassociate these things. Again, there are plenty of reasons why it's beneficial to learn Spanish in your local community. But the other thing, again, is imagine people that don't have the funds to just be able to pick up and go somewhere. People have kids and people have things, responsibilities. Like, I just don't ever want, people know this, but I remember almost feeling, not that this influenced my travel plans, but I remember almost feeling obligated to just go up and down Latin America and just practice and use my Spanish out in the street. Like, it's a waste if you don't go out and use it in other countries. Like, that's not true. That's not true. Like, that's not true. To be honest, the reactions that I get using Spanish in the States, in my local community now, is better. I feel like it's appreciated more. It's less expected. Therefore, the reactions, the responses are so much more profound when people in the metro Atlanta area where I live, or any place where I go. I went to South Carolina last year and I was speaking Spanish on the beach with some families, and they're like, "¿Cómo es que aprendiste español?" So it's the again, I'm rambling here. Let me cut this. The last point I want to make is a point that I think many of us, as we progress through, this may or may not be the last point, but the next point that I want to make, that I think many of us that advance past the intermediate level to an advanced level in Spanish, what we'll start to notice is, to maintain your Spanish, you need less time, and you still consume the language, you still work with the language. I'm actually gonna have an italki class lesson on Saturday, like, honestly. So I'm still active in learning, I still want to refine my Spanish, but it requires less demanding. It's less demanding in terms of a time investment. And so you have other hobbies and interests that you'd like to pursue on your time off. I love playing tennis. I might insert some clips here playing tennis. I'm about to get heavily into gardening. My backyard is about to be filled with fruits and vegetables, hopefully. I want to get into some form of cycling, whether it be mountain biking or trail cycling. I just have other hobbies and interests that I might want to use during my free time versus gallivanting around South America and Latin America. I'm still going to do that. But I'm just saying there are other things that might take priority in your life, and I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I'm wasting this skill that I've learned by not buying flights to and from Latin America every chance you get, okay? So yeah, I know this video was all over the place, but I just wanted to clarify that I still like traveling. I'll go anywhere, especially if I have somebody with me. I literally will go anywhere that's relatively safe. But I'm not going to just gallivant across Latin America just to speak Spanish. If I have a friend somewhere, I'll go visit my friend. If there's something that I really want to see, I'll go see it and then use the Spanish language as a tool to help me get that experience. But I'm not going to make any trip. I'm not going to make the sole purpose of any trip to use the language. Just like I'm not going to go to any random city in my country just to practice using the language. Again, for cultural reasons, to explore certain things, yes. But just for using the language in itself is the point that I was making in that initial video, and the point that I'm reaffirming here. It just doesn't make sense for someone at my level. When I was earlier on, oh yeah, it made sense. I was happy. I was like, it was sensory overload. I was like, oh yeah, this is insane. But right now, that's not the case. I want to disassociate those two things. Those of you that are learning and you don't want to travel, it's okay. Those of you that are learning and that love to travel, it's okay. Different strokes for different folks. Guys, I hope you appreciated this video. I hope this was insightful. If you don't feel that way, let me know. I've been getting a lot of negative comments lately, which is fine. You got to remember, guys, I've worked with teenagers for almost 10 years now. from like 11 to 18 years old. You don't know how many insults you get from an angry 15-year-old who can't control their emotions. Like, so the negative comments don't bother me at all. Keep them coming. I'm just going to say thank you for watching. But those of you that have seriously critical comments that are actually using logic, just let me know what you think below and if this video was insightful at all. I appreciate you guys as always for watching. Muchas gracias por ver. Como siempre. Y creo que los videos que tengo pendientes les va a gustar a ustedes mucho. Bueno, chicos, nos vemos. Chao. Hasta luego.